What's up? Welcome to Tales Tomorrow. I'm Morrow, your storyteller for today, and with me I have some more RPG horror story email submissions. I don't know why I went really zesty there. Whenever I'm in VR, it tends to want to just kind of move around because you can express yourself in really cool ways in VR because I get to be my avatar. It's really cool. Anyway, zesty Morrow aside, let's go ahead and get to the email submissions for today. Player throws a tantrum when DM thinks outside the box. Hi Morrow, I'm a big fan. After getting a new job that lets me listen to YouTube all day, I have your playlist going on in my ear from clock in to clock out most days. My story is nowhere near the level of horror as most of what gets shared to you, but I want to get it off my chest anyway. Mostly because it feels like it could have easily become a horror story, all railroading and stealing ideas from anime. Not to mention the guys hissed a fit over the central element of what transpired. Now that you say that, I'm gonna be so self-conscious because I'm gonna be thinking like, man, I need to like re-edit the video because it sounds weird and I don't want Sharon, I hope I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name, but I hope Sharon is having a decent time listening to the video and it's not just grating on their ears the whole day. That'd be the worst, man. Now I'm gonna be self-conscious about my audio levels. Anyway, let's continue with the story. Major players: Michael, the DM, Trevor, the Minotaur Barbarian, Glenn, Drow Ranger Cleric Multiclass, Jason, Dragonborn Sorcerer, Derek, Kenku Artificer, Eleanor, Tiefling Paladin. So this is in D&D 5th edition with a game that's pretty interesting. I'm still not 100% used to 5e, but the other players are helping Jason, and I get a hang for things in regards to how abilities work. Rules that were changed from 4th edition, and for all the questionable decisions Michael made, he was actually really helpful when Jason had his more out there character idea, and he supplied a way to make it happen. The plot is reminiscent of the first 5 Final Fantasy games, where there are 4 elemental crystals that have been possessed by agents of an evil god, and it's up to us, the party, to purify them, while getting caught up in some side plots along the way. Story happens during our trek to the second crystal, the Crystal of Wind. We found our way to the temple, but it was magically sealed and required a MacGuffin to open. It was pretty blatant railroading since we had a character that was able to pick locks and both our casters tried spells to get in, but nothing worked. The closest we got was when Derek did an investigation roll to see if there was anything that would work and came across details about the aforementioned MacGuffin. So our quest began to scour the country for where the key was so we could prevent the world from being destroyed. Out of character, Trevor was exasperated and brought this up with the DM, asking, why do we have to trek all the way to the temple if you were just going to be locked out? If you want to have us do other quests before doing the Wind Crystal, why not just put more obstacles or hooks in the way of our trip? Michael answered, I just thought it would be more realistic than the ancient temple with a superpowered artifact that would determine the fate of the world would have some security so no one could use it for evil. Ignoring the fact that the whole plot was the fact that the crystals were already being used for evil, which begged the question of how bad guys got in corrupt crystals when we were locked out. Jason suspected that the bad guys were actually waiting for us to open the temple for them, something that a previous DM did, but Michael didn't know our previous DM at the time, so that was written off. Eventually we relented and went along with the railroad. We found our way to the nearest city, refilled our supplies, and then began asking around about the key or temple itself. What happened next made Trevor put his hand on his face in disbelief. The key was the grand prize in this kingdom's annual trading card game tournament. Okay, well you had me at Final Fantasy setting and then your DM completely floundered. Final Fantasy games, I'm not sure if you played them specifically, but let's say I put Final Fantasy X as example, right? Pour exemple. You go to a town, you do all the stuff there, move on to the next town. Then you get to the town, you do all the stuff there, move on to the next town. It's a little bit linear, obviously, but it works really well because you get to a town, get all the tasks completed for it, move on to the next thing. Do all this stuff, move on to the next thing. Do all this stuff. It makes a proper pacing where you don't have to constantly backtrack to a bunch of places. Railroading your players to go from place A to place B to place C and continuously is one thing, but railroading your party to go to place A, but then you can't go there until you go to B, C, D, E, and F, and then backtrack back to the other cities, back towards A, just to get through A. Yeah, that can be kind of exhausting, so I'm fully on your party for that. But also, why is the key to a place is behind a trading card game tournament? Are they just giving out free keys every year? Oh, this Temple of Evil's key, we've got to play Yu-Gi-Oh for it. And this Temple of Wind, Pokemon. Most of the players laughed at this interesting revelation. Glenn actually looked intrigued. After Jason, who was laughing the most hysterically, calmed down, Glenn started to learn more about the game itself. Michael brought out some of his magic cards to explain the game in very broad terms. Eventually breaking character to explain, he wasn't actually going to make us play against him, humble bragging that it wouldn't be fair to us because of how experienced he was. Imagine if your DM says, hey, I got a puzzle you gotta solve. You gotta beat champions in a tournament, and he pulls out like a thing of Yahtzee, and you gotta just play your DM in Yahtzee. Not even playing D&D at that point, just playing Yahtzee. Although I was thinking of maybe creating like, or using like little silly mini games online to have players solve certain puzzles. Like maybe not just, you know, googling some, but maybe if I were to program some, and if they were to like solve something online on like, I don't know, Discord or something, they might be able to get a key or like an answer to get continuously through. That'd be kind of cool. But just to be like, hey, yeah, to proceed, you gotta make sure you beat me in Magic the Gathering. Pull out your deck, let's go. Trevor began asking the characters why they felt the need for these kind of games, since we all lived in a world where there were real demons, zombies, dragons, wizards, and fish people. It seems strange that they will play out these fantasy card battles, but they could pick up a spear and go out and fight real dangers, and probably save people while doing it. Michael responded in character by saying that not everyone was brave or tough enough to go on real adventures, so they played this game to try to experience the same thrills and trials from the safety of their own homes. Glenn backed him up, and his character agreed wholeheartedly. Getting more frustrated, Trevor said that this was a waste of time. In character, of course, as his giant bull man who occasionally went into a battle range was surprisingly impatient, and that we should just steal the key. Arguing that we shouldn't be leaving the fate of the world to a hand of cards, the others resisted, which he was even more taken aback by because earlier in the campaign, Derek and Eleanor actually derailed an earlier story beat. Apparently the paladin will freak out if you have to work with the necromancer who has shown they're a good person, but won't bat an eye at possibly letting the world be destroyed by an evil god if she loses at Go Fish. Glenn was all for this quest, revealing he played some card games with his friends when he wasn't with us, and I suspect Jason voted to play the card game because he enjoyed listening to Trevor hate every moment of this development. In and out of character, he did do a little trolling. The way it worked from then on was they needed to do different checks using different stats to try to build out decks. Since Trevor was playing a battle-hardened warrior with maxed out strength, dexterity, and constitution, he did not have the mental acuity to build a super powerful deck. The DM said we didn't need to actually build decks, just describe what kind of deck we would build, and then a combination of rolling intelligence and wisdom and spending gold to actually make it. He clarified that the better rolls we got during the step and the more gold we spend, the better our chances in the actual tournament. Glenn got really into it, so much so that on top of using his multi-class super high wisdom to get bonuses, the DM gave him an additional bonus for being so thorough in describing the ins and outs of his character's deck, something Derek and Jason would later emulate so they wouldn't miss out. Ironically, the other party members would declare that would help Trevor make his deck better to make up for his low stats. Looking back, this should have been a team-building moment, when the more intellectual characters made up for the friend's deficit the way Trevor once saved Derek from being swarmed by kobolds. But initially he refused because he was so adamant he didn't want to do this card game story. But now they decided to bring it up, the world was at stake, and I needed every advantage in this tournament. Again, why is the world at stake over a card game? You would think it'd be maybe like more like a side quest. You have a lot of side quests in Final Fantasy games, a ton of silly side quests that you can do for the sake of fun. You could have put this as like a fun little thing to get maybe a +2 weapon or something. That would have been awesome, but not to hold an important, world-defining, world-ending MacGuffin. That seems a little silly, you know? Now everybody has to stress over it instead of just having fun. The session ended shortly after because of how long the desert trek took, and Trevor spoke to Michael shortly after out of character, asking him why. Why were we playing card games in the middle of a D&D game instead of something that made sense, like having to steal it from a corrupt noble, raid an ancient tomb for it, or even bartering for it with locals? Michael replied that he wanted to try something unique and unexpected. He talked about how he liked to shake up the games he DM'd because he didn't want his adventures to be too generic. The latter point is something Glenn and Vicky actually backed up, being his friends. Again, that's nothing wrong with trying to spice things up or make something less generic, but at the end of the day, to lock an important MacGuffin behind this, like the party's gonna be stressing over this, of course. I say this would have been great as like a side activity, like a side tournament, be like, ooh, we have a super important +2 armor or weapon and stuff, and it's maybe like really powerful. Hell, maybe make something +3, I don't know, a staff of fireballs is on on the table or something, you know? Players can do it if they want to, or they can choose not to do it, or maybe come back to it later as like some sort of side activity. But locking this whole scenario behind a single card tournament to basically define whether the party can continue with the main quest or not, that feels silly, because now everybody's stressing out and trying to get this whole thing worked out, and probably gonna be it's just gonna be a big mess, you know? Trevor argued that while some changes are acceptable, as an old DM who played with really knew how to shake things up, the throwing in something that didn't belong in a fantasy setting really messed with the group's immersion. When the tournament actually began, Michael had the other participants act like characters from the Yu-Gi-Oh show, taking this game way too seriously, as if it actually had an impact on the world. Kinda did. When an NPC won, they acted like they had killed Demogorgon. Of course, Trevor lost pretty early on because he had a penalty to wisdom, which was required to play the game. The other players shrugged but seemed to roleplay the character's pity, or in Jason's case, disappointment, a little too well. Much like in Yu-Gi-Oh, two of the remaining PCs had to play against each other. Pretty sure it was Derek and Glenn. Michael expected it to be an emotional dilemma where they would weaken the party's chances of winning. Instead, Derek's player just pointed out that they probably didn't have to roll at all, since what really mattered was the party members was the one to win. It didn't matter which one. At first, it looked like Michael was about to start arguing back, demanding the emotional payoff he got from those kinds of Saturday morning cartoons, but thankfully for all of us, he didn't pursue the idea and just asked for which one they wanted to go on. However, there was still a catch. They had to describe their decks going against each other, with Derek describing that although he knew he was going to lose, he would accept it in character because it was for the good of the group. He got an inspiration die. Pretty sure the only reason Trevor didn't complain is because he knew it would be hypocritical of him after all of his "how you want to do this" says when getting kills in combat. To no one's surprise, the 430-year-old drow elf beat the cocky human champion, even though Michael made it clear that he struggled due to how powerful the champion's cards were. Of course, Trevor asked if the champ's deck was so powerful and would assure victory, why didn't everyone use an exact replica of it? I remember in Yu-Gi-Oh! Pegasus made all the cards and kept the best one for himself, which is why he was so hard to beat, but Michael never outright stated that that was the case in a fantasy world. His response was just that he had more experience and something about that not only is deck good, but he knows how other deck works, blah blah blah. I bet Trevor would have honestly rather preferred that Michael say that this final boss was actually a cheater who would have to expose this fraud using real skill checks. He was actually stunned by this suggestion, reacting the same way Stephen King reacted to the movie version of The Mist. Why didn't I think of that? Seeming to forget that Yu-Gi-Oh! Had tons of characters that cheated. I get it if the final boss is a cheater, and that'd be really cool to kind of do a little bit of a twist that the character is not actually good at the game, but at cheating, and it's not all about time to catch him in the act and call him out mid-match. But to have somebody that's just like, I'm just so good, and I'm just so good because I know about all the decks, yada yada. It's like a self-insert. Like, yeah, maybe your DM is really good at Magic the Gathering, but like having a self-insert just be like, I'm just so good, I'll just be unbeatable and stuff, over a MacGuffin that's extremely important to the rest of the plot. It's like, do you want the players to have a MacGuffin or not, DM? Pick one, you can't have both. We claimed the trophy/key and used it to open the Temple of the Wind Crystal. Trevor finally got to have some fun, where he showed the weird monsters lurking in the temple turned dragon, while ancient Greece feared his kind. Jason turning to Trevor and suggesting challenges wherever we were fighting to a card game became a recurring joke. Eventually we fought a boss and they purified the crystal. We then set out for the Fire Crystal, where we were immediately abducted by the evil champion of the evil empire. Had to escape another dungeon, but at least that part of the game won't have card games. Time for the Himalayan twist. I was Trevor, the impatient, rude barbarian player who was used to D&D just being non-stop fights. I forgot that it's billed as the world's greatest role-playing game. I may have gone overboard being confrontational, but I didn't appreciate being railroaded, especially when the story segment had little to do with the story and come across as a fanfiction of our characters playing Magic. But thankfully it didn't destroy the group, and the worst consequence was the dent in the table identical to my face. But I still feel frustrated and want to get the story off my chest. Well, it's not real magic unless you have a group of goblins, let's say for example, called the Pinkletings, and they're knocking at your door asking if you have your very super awesome rare and very unreleased magic cards hidden somewhere. If you know, you know. There's a whole Pinkerton thing about Magic the Gathering. Anyway, a bit weird to have to railroad the important story plot that could end the entire campaign behind a card game. Seriously, could have just been a side quest the players could take on another time. You could have fleshed it out to make it really nice and really easy to work with. Honestly, I feel so bitter for you. I feel so bitter for you that I kind of just want to try to make my own version of this that's simpler, easier, and it's basically Yu-Gi-Oh but in D&D, but very basic, simple, bare bones, just as a fun side quest. That's what I want to do. I want to make a side quest just to show that this can be done and it can be fun. Honestly, what a wasted opportunity to make something extremely fun for players to enjoy on the side without having to be locked into an important story MacGuffin. Still though, thanks so much for submitting your story. I really appreciate it, and I'm hoping that this can be added to another playlist of videos you can listen to while at work. Thank you so much for submission. Let's get to the next story for today. Warlock constantly mocks fellow player for enjoying anything, by Josh. Howdy Morrow, I sent the story to Crispy's Tavern a few months ago and more recently to Crick Crab. Figured you enjoy it as well. Honestly, I don't know what it is. It may sound kind of cheesy, but I feel really flattered and a little peppy shy that you even want to send me anything at all. Like, genuinely, thank you so much. I appreciate it. This is a campaign amassed from the Mr. Ripper LFG Discord server. The campaign was advertised as a 1920s prohibition-inspired mafia setting, with technology from time period mingling with the magic shenanigans of D&D 5e, where instead of alcohol being banned, the country had instead prohibited the usage of magic potions of any kind. Really creative premise of a roleplay focused campaign with a lighter emphasis on combat. It was advertised as such. The party composition, I'll be referring to the players by the names of the characters. Giano, played by myself, a fairy Path of the Giant barbarian. Nice. Dominic, Dampier Bloodhunter of a Lycan Order. Thoriek, a Dragonborn Conquest Paladin. Kabat, a Mousefolk Ranger, who joins the party from time to time as a guest appearance. And our DM, who is new to DMing, but is doing a frankly fantastic job, as I hinted at earlier with his campaign concept. You might notice that we're missing a caster in our tank-heavy party. We noticed that too, and continue to advertise for another player. Enter the problem player. To be honest, I don't think the problem was entirely with him as a player, and more that his playstyle didn't align well with ours, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Since he did not consent to having his character be part of the story, I'm going to name him Darius. Why does Darius sound either as a heroic name or some sort of a bad guy? I don't know what it is. When I hear the name Darius, I don't think of some generic person. I think of like the evilest person that ever existed or the goodest person that ever lived. I don't know. It just sounds to me just has vibes of heroism or max evil. Darius was a Shadow Kai Hexbait warlock with no backstory. Would have been a red flag, except that my own character didn't have a backstory until halfway through the first session either. No specified alignment, red flag, and seemingly no interest in a roleplay, red flag. At the time, however, we chalked it up to awkwardness since he was new to a party that had already been playing for a few sessions now. A week after his introductory session, a friend of mine made reference art of my character as a gift. I'm still so thankful to them for doing so. I've always seen him as an incredibly talented artist, and I immediately showed it off to the server group chat. Terry's response to the gorgeous art my friend graciously and painstakingly made of my character: "No offense, but you would have gotten better result from an AI. He's an axe-wielding berserker type, right?" Great, I thought. An a-hole. And an AI bro to boot. I did my best to civilly remind him that this was, again, a gift from a friend. I didn't want to go into the AI art debate at the moment, I just wanted to smooth over the disagreement. This, however, turned out to be a premonition of his out-of-game behavior in the months to come. Nah, you know what? Screw Darius. Your friend put together something that was handcrafted, painstakingly probably, of your character. You should have the right to enjoy it and appreciate it and show it off to somebody. And if somebody else says, "Oh, you should have done X, you should have done Y, this could look better with AI." Hey Darius, how about you shut up and look at something that was done by humans instead of by a bunch of robots for once. Look at what can be done by humans once somebody puts their mind to it. Or maybe just don't say anything at all, Darius. Don't say anything at all. Keep your dumb opinions to yourself. Anytime any of us try to talk about anything in the group chat, Darius would always have something similarly condescending to say about the topic. One time we were showing off our dice collection, to which he'd say, "How much you pay for that set?" $15? That's 14 more than I would have paid for them. You do know you can use an online dice roller for free, right? Oh my god, Darius sounds like a kind of person that doesn't have fun. God forbid you want to have a physical dice set with actual physical feel to it. Have you ever felt a D20 physically in your hand? Have you ever felt the raw feeling, and this is probably something that's going to relate to a lot of people, of holding a 1d4 in your fingertips and feeling the spiky, pokey stabbing into your fingers? It feels so tactile and painful, but kind of a good kind of painful. All the sharp edges of all the dice feel so tactile and like they tickle your hand when you roll them in your hand or just holding it, because it's constantly stabbing you a little bit into your hand, but it feels so good to hold a dice. I don't have like a tactile D&D dice fetish or anything, but man, does it feel so good to hold them in your hands and feel little stabs and pokes as you roll them on a table. And there's nothing wrong at all with wanting to collect things like that, especially D&D dice. There's nothing wrong with wanting to collect anything. Darius just sounds like a kind of guy that doesn't want to have fun. You know, we figured out Darius is the evil kind of Darius, not the heroic Darius. Several times he demanded we start the session later than the scheduled time because he was still eating, or he signed up for a one-shot at the same time slot as our campaign. We all have continually shifting work schedules and try to be accommodating to each other, but the rest of us never demanded that everyone else conform their schedules around our whims. If you ever couldn't to make it to a session, let the others know. Darius, meanwhile, seemed to want to monopolize our time and energy. In-game, he wasn't much better. I want to make it clear that our party is pretty neutral aligned, and Dominic and Thoriak, you are pretty major edgelords. They know this, however, and play into it for comedic or storyline effect, since they actually engage in a roleplay. Darius, however, wasn't ever there. He could only focus on a campaign if it was his turn in combat, refusing to engage in roleplay opportunities with the rest of the party as we tried our best to include him in whatever we were doing at the time. So not only is Darius a buzzkill and a jerk, but also is so self-absorbed that they're not going to interact with anything unless something has to do with their special little character. If it doesn't have to do with my character, I'm AFKing and going on Twitter and doing whatever, maybe looking up more AI art or whatever. Darius doesn't sound like a fun person to be around with. Honestly, I hope y'all kick him out earlier than later, but there's still more to read, so let's keep going. One session we played, Dominic, Darius, and I were the only people able to join due to Kabad and Thoriak were having work. Thus, we all decided that it was to be purely a shopping session. No combat, no real story beats, just downtime. I had fun role-playing Giano getting scammed in an alleyway over a pair of sunglasses. Dominic went to buy some magic items to continue min-maxing his Blood Hunter. Kabad went to go get some food before he left to go to work. Darius tried to kill every single shopkeep. The cosmetic shopkeep survived. The sleeping old lady running the magic weapon shop did not. Great, not only is he a buzzkill, but he's also a murder hobo. Yay, so fun. Why did your DM allow Darius to try to kill or even allow him to kill shopkeep, considering you guys were doing a shopping session? You're doing a downtime shopping session, just doing whatever. But Darius is gonna be stopping that by killing the shopkeepers. Why? Why was this allowed? None of the rest of the party was okay with this, in or out of character. Out of character, we were all naturally frustrated at this murder hoboism. In character, Dominic was upset because of his good alignment, Gianna was upset because he truly cared about the local businesses, and even evil aligned Thoriak, who'd been secretly sacrificing homeless stragglers to his evil patron, was mad because the idiot had murdered the shopkeep out in the open. The DM in particular was really upset. He spent a long time designing this world, and Darius refusing to engage with the story of the roleplay or anything put a bit of a dampener on his enthusiasm. And to be honest, I was still really upset about the AI comment. And yet, Darius would refuse to interact with us in and out of character when we tried to let him know of our issues with how he was playing his character. If Darius refused to listen to your feedback or your complaints and concerns, they probably don't deserve to play in your campaign. Like seriously, the only thing the guy had to do just not be the biggest dickhead in the world, and he's accomplishing being the biggest dickhead in the world. It's like he's pinning for just being the person disliked the most in this campaign, just for the sake of it, saying all the right things that are perfectly calculated. You don't think Darius has like a fetish for it, do you? Some people, unironically, listen, this is a weird tangent, but unironically, some people have an actual fetish or a kink to basically be disliked or hated, or sometimes even be berated or insulted over those stupid decisions. Some dudes out there actually have like a weird kink where they want to be berated, they want to be insulted, or they want to be disliked and hated. They get off on that. Like they will do that well someday, maybe like at a club or something, and then they'll go jerk to it afterwards, be like, oh god, yeah, everybody hated me so much. Oh, I probably shouldn't be making the happy face while I'm pretending like I'm jerking off. That's gonna be clipped, and I hope you don't clip it. Let's continue. All of this came to a head out of a game when I was asking for the server group chat with the DM's permission if the party wanted to play a non-canon one-shot through the Tomb of Horrors for Halloween. I was being fascinated with how bad the Tomb of Horrors is from the game design perspective, and I was inspired to run it by XP to level 3's Dungeon Delve. Nice. This will be my first time DMing anything. Dominic, Thoriak, and our usual DM were all interested. I let everyone know ahead of time that dungeon is exploration based and not combat heavy. I also warned the players about how crappily designed the tomb is, and that we'd mainly just be playing as a light-hearted meat grinder. And then Darius asked why I didn't just run a different dungeon for the one-shot. I could provide books if you need. I could provide books if you need. Or you could just throw our characters in a cage with a bunch of monsters and call it a day. I said no. I specifically wanted to run Tomb of Horrors, and that I wanted to do so because I wanted all of us to have fun making fun of this incredibly famous dungeon that would feel right at home as a Mario Maker troll level. Darius, ad verbatim, "Yeah, it's a shame. I love combat and most of the builds are made toward damage output. That's why I'm so quiet in sessions. Unless I'm torturing someone." Me, ad verbatim, "I get that. And you don't have to join if you don't want to. But maybe this could be a fun way for you to try a different part of D&D out for a change. The dungeon focused, or at least attempt to focus, more on exploration and puzzle solving. More like a Zelda dungeon than a game of Doom. I've tried that before. I didn't like it, so I'll not bother." He said this in a public group chat of the Discord server, where the DM would read it. The campaign was, again, advertised as roleplay heavy and combat light. We told Darius that it was a roleplay heavy campaign at session 0, that we held when we first joined the campaign. It's weird that he's just coming in and be like, "No thanks, I don't want to join for this thing. I don't want to be part of it. I just want to make comments about it and stuff." It's really strange for the guy to do it, but at the end of the day, I feel like Darius is the kind of guy that just enjoys attention on himself, and he probably acts out and does weird things for attention. Or like I said earlier, maybe it's like a degradation king, and he just wants to be the worst. He just wants to be the most hated guy in the room. DM said that he was sorry the campaign wasn't to his liking and his style of play. He and the rest of us wished for him in finding a group that better suited him, and the DM kicked him from the campaign and the server. The aftermath had been quite nice. Since we still needed a caster, Thuriak asked if his girlfriend could join, and she's playing a fairy trickster cleric named Throw, Chaotic Evil. She's been a blast to play with so far, since instead of murder-hoboing or torturing, or refusing to interact with the party, her character instead spreads misinformation and deceit to sow chaos wherever she goes. And she's really sweet and talkative out of game too. Funny how much simply not being an a-hole goes towards people liking you in and out of game. That's it. Thanks for reading. If you like the screenshot receipts, I can provide them. No, trust me, I believe you. I genuinely believe you. I mean, if you want to provide them, you're more than welcome to, but I believe you. Darius sounds like a kind of person that I feel like all of us ran into at some capacity, at some extent, even outside of TTRPGs. They're the kind of person that's a buzzkill, a-hole. They don't realize the kind of things they're saying. They're just saying things for the sake of saying and maybe to just get attention and just to do some weird stuff. I had a Darius of some kind. God, was it middle school? Yeah, it was middle school. I was just basically fresh off the boat from Russia, so I barely understood any English, and it was this weird guy that did some really weird, bizarre stuff. And it almost seems like he just had a riot and a blast whenever people disliked whenever he did weird things. He was just a really strange guy. Whenever he got to the point where he started smelling like piss and just saying some weird stuff to girls, I just kind of stopped hanging out with him. I shouldn't have made friends with the guy. I was just trying to be too nice and just didn't know how to say in English, "Please leave me alone." But man, what a story. I feel like I missed out so many. I'm sorry it took me so long just to get to these, honestly, but thanks so much for your story submission. I really appreciate it. I wish you much less Dariuses in your life, and for everybody to not ever encounter. Here, I'll provide you my blessing. I bless you with the power to never encounter Darius in your life. You've been blessed. If the blessing doesn't work for you, sorry, no refunds. And with that, that's gonna be all our stories for today. I want to thank you very much for watching, and thanks so much for being here. If you like what I do, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Also, if the RPG Horror Stories ever goes down, or if you want to submit your own personalized horror story, email is down in the description below. I'll see you again in more Tales tomorrow. Bye-bye.